Hey makers, it's Jen from Minerva. Today I'm back with another video tutorial about every sewist's favorite feature, pockets! Yeah, I agree. I think every garment should have pockets, but what if you have a garment that doesn't have any? Well, in sewing, I think there's a solution to everything. So today I'm going to show you how to install pockets on existing garments in 3 different ways. All right, let's get started. First up, I'm going to be adding some patch pockets to this pink jacket. You might recognize it because I actually made this in a previous video titled One Pattern, 3 Ways, where I used the Simplicity 8657 pattern hacking pattern and created 3 different looks from one pattern. I had used this delicious teddy faux fur coating from the Minerva core range and had some left over, which was perfect to be able to add the pockets for. This teddy faux fur is super soft and has a 4-way stretch with 60% along the width and 10% along the length. It was perfect to make this open front jacket, and it's heavy enough to keep me warm without needing any lining. Best part is this fabric is 100% polyester, which means I can toss this jacket in the washer whenever I need to. I'm going to get started with just a simple piece of printer paper, a pencil or marking utensil, a ruler, and a curved ruler to draft a quick pattern piece. Alternatively, you can use a plate, water bottle, or anything round if you don't have a curved ruler. Generally, we need about 5 to 6 inches for a pocket opening to be able to fit our hands through. For length, that can vary and might even be a design feature, but a good rule of thumb is somewhere between 5 and 7 inches. When in doubt, you can always measure your hand on a ruler as well and see what width is right for you. I'm going to start with making a square on my sheet of paper, 7 inches for the width and 7.5 inches for the length. I'm going for a slightly oversized pocket, but keep in mind large pocket openings can gape open and affect the fit, but that's more likely in an inseam pocket instead of a patch pocket like I'm making here. Now, because I want the top of my pocket to have the same width as my sleeve cuff, I'm going to add that to the end of my pocket as seam allowance. It measures about 2 inches, so that is what I'm going to add to the end of my pocket. I want to now add my seam allowance around my pocket. I plan to add a binding to the raw edge, so I'm just adding an allowance of 3/8 of an inch. There's no big rule here on seam allowance, but you should consider your fabric. Thick or heavy fabrics might need a larger seam allowance than thinner fabrics. Time to cut out the pocket pattern piece. To get a sense of size for the pocket pattern, I'm going to fold down that 2-inch area. I also wanted to have rounded corners at the bottom of my pocket, so I'm folding it in half lengthwise, and then I'm going to match the bottom corners. Using my curved ruler or round object, I'm going to draw a curved line from side to bottom of the pattern piece. I'm doing this with the seam allowance already drawn on, so we can assume this curved line will also include the seam allowance. Then just trim off along the drawn line. Let's test this pattern piece on the front of the jacket before I cut any fabric. I can tell that I can easily fit my hand inside and fully extend it, but the opening is almost next to the side seam, which might not be comfortable to put my hands into. I think I can shorten this pocket by about 2 inches and it will be better proportioned for the jacket. Folding the pattern piece back, I am already liking the size better. I'm going to cut off the bottom but leave some for seam allowance. Repeating the same process as before, I'm going to redraw my curved lines at the bottom corners. I think it's important, especially for a visible design feature such as a patch pocket, to test out the pattern piece to make sure it's the right proportion. Okay, time to cut the pocket pieces out. I've got my extra teddy faux fur and I'm going to place my pattern piece on top of the fabric and cut two pieces out. I have my pocket pieces cut out, and as I mentioned before, I wanted to add a binding finish to the edges so that it matches the interior of the jacket. This is why makers never toss anything. Here's my extra binding that I created for the previous project. Yes, I still have it. To make these, I cut 1.5 wide strips on the bias. Then I pressed the raw edges inward towards the center, and then folded it in half again and pressed. I'm going to be placing this binding around the outer edge of the pocket. And for the top of the pocket, I'm unfolding that center fold and using the single fold width. All right, I'm going to hop over to the sewing machine and stitch these on. I've got my single fold bias piece for the top of the pocket, which I'm going to sew on first. Placing it at the top, overlapping the edge, I'm going to stitch down the binding edge that's touching the fabric. I'm going to fold back the top portion of the pocket back by that 2 inches we added to match the sleeve. Then on both sides of the pocket, I'm going to stitch using the 3/8 seam allowance. Add the double fold binding along the edge of the pocket, starting at the top of the pocket. Following around the raw edge of the pocket, sew on the binding. Trim off any additional binding and turn the folded edge right side out and push your corners out. Lastly, stitch from one side to the other of that single fold binding, closing the top portion of the pocket. Time to hop on over to the iron. We'll want to give our pocket a press and turn back these bound edges by the seam allowance. I've got the pockets all pressed. I like to lay them on top of each other and make sure that they're the same size, and I don't need to make any other adjustments before I sew them on. I'm going to place one pocket on. I decided I want these to be at an angle to make it more comfortable to put my hands in, but you can place them differently. I'm liking this positioning, so I'm going to pin this pocket into place. You might know I don't do a ton of pins, so I'm just doing one on the top, the bottom, and both sides. I also like to try on my jacket just to make sure I'm happy with where these are sitting before I place the second pocket. I'm satisfied with my pocket placement, so I'm going to move on to placing the second one. At first, I will eyeball its placement, but knowing that's likely not enough, I will use a ruler to help guide me to getting the placement as close as possible. I use a few points on the pocket and try to match the measurements. Once it is close, I will pin it into place the same way I did for the first pocket. Another way is you can also just lay the fronts of the jackets on top of one another and then feel around to see if those pockets are laying in the same place. It's usually an easy trick. Our very last step is to stitch these pockets on. And with just a single row of top stitching, here they are. My pockets are added, and now my hands won't be cold the next time I step out in this jacket. Why any dress is designed without pockets, I'll never know. It's the greatest feature ever invented, if you ask me. I have this ready-to-wear dress that I love, and it's almost perfect, but it has no pockets. So I'm going to fix that with adding some inseam pockets with a coordinating fabric. Adding fabric to an existing garment can be tricky, and matching a print can be even harder. Luckily, this fabric is a challis type material, so I decided to look for something that coordinated instead of matching. This viscose challis fabric is from the Minerva core range, which has a whopping 67 different color options. It's a lightweight woven fabric and 100% viscose. This fabric has a ton of potential. It's so soft and buttery with fantastic drape. Challis is one of my favorite fabrics to both sew and wear. All right, just like the last pocket, we are going to start with creating a pattern piece. You'll need a piece of printer paper, a writing utensil, a straight ruler, and a curved one. Drafting an inseam pocket pattern is fairly simple, and they generally have a similar C shape. Before we get to the curves, I like to start with creating a box. I am drawing a straight line that is 9 inches long. I'm going to make my box 6 inches wide, which is approximately the width of my hand with a little extra. Assuming the top of the box is the top of my pocket, I complete my box with squaring 2 additional lines. One is marking the bottom of my pocket opening, which I'm squaring off at a 1/2 inch. Because we want the pocket to stand away from the side seam, we will square a second line perpendicular from the bottom line to the bottom of the box. Now I'm picking up my curved ruler to draw in my C shape. I'm starting at the bottom and working my way around and connecting it to the top. At the top here, I came out about 1 inch from the top to keep my pocket from feeling too small, but as long as the pocket is big enough for your hand, the exact shape isn't going to be a huge deal. Once you're satisfied, you can add some seam allowance and cut it out. I like to use the same allowance as my dress. I went ahead and tried this dress on and noted that I wanted my pockets to start about 2 inches from the waist seam. Working on the inside of the dress, I will begin marking where the pockets will go, starting with pinning that 2 inches below the waist. Next, using my pocket pattern, I'm going to mark the bottom of the pocket opening with a pin. All right, it's time to get unstitching. Generally, I like to use 2 different types of tools, which are an X-Acto blade or my thread snips. An X-Acto blade can make fast work of slicing threads, but this fabric is a little on the delicate side. I've definitely worn this dress a lot, so I'm going to opt for thread snips today instead. Starting a little past my pins for my pocket placement, I'm going to clip the threads on both ends. This garment has a single thread chain stitch, often found when you use a cover stitch machine. These work a little bit differently than a typical straight stitch, as the bottom threads are looped, so they can be a little tricky to get out. But here's a little trick I've picked up. I will usually try both ends, but there's always a single direction that if you pull the thread, the loops will just pop out. Easy peasy. Even better, this is also true for a double needle cover stitch too. When looking at the top side of your serged seam, check out if it's a 3 or 4 thread. 4 thread will have 2 rows looking like a straight stitch, and a 3 thread will look like this with just 1. Just like before, snipping at about the same places that we did for the chain stitch removal, lift out a few of those straight stitches, enough to pull the thread with your fingers. Pull the thread until it releases from the other side. Then pull off those loop threads and clip them off. With our seams unstitched, we can cut out our pockets. I'm going to layer my fabric so that I can cut all 4 pocket pieces I need at the same time. Then I'm going to lay my pocket piece on top and cut everything out. All right, side seams are open, pocket fabric is cut. I'm ready to start sewing. One at a time, I'm going to place the pocket to the side seam, right sides together. At the machine, we will stitch the length of the pocket, and then opening them up, I'm going to understitch the allowance towards the pocket bag. My pocket pieces are sewn on and I added my understitching. This will allow my pocket to stay hidden and not pop out of my dress. Let's finish this pocket up. We are going to sew along the side seam, pivoting to follow around the pocket and making sure we start and stop our stitching where we cut our threads earlier. And that's it. I added some serging around the edge, but a nice zigzag stitch would also work too. I think adding some kind of seam finish here does help the pocket bag from unraveling with your wash and wear. Flipping the dress right side out, you can see that the pockets are fairly invisible and my hand slips right in. I've got one last suggestion on adding pockets to your existing garments, and that's a zippered welt pocket. This is by far the riskiest option as we will be cutting a pocket hole into the front of this jacket, but don't worry, we are going to take things slow and I know it's going to look great in the end. I picked up some metal closed-in jean zips from Minerva in navy blue, and I found this great suiting fabric too. This fabric is from the Minerva core range, and it's a polyester viscose suiting in the blue and pink combo. Its pop of teal goes perfectly with the existing contrasting lining of this jacket, and it's just a hint of fun as the interior pocket bag. This suiting group has a ton of color options too. Seriously, there are 87 choices. It's a medium weight woven fabric that is 57 inches wide and it's 65% polyester and 35% viscose. It's soft, but it does have some great structure and definitely has a lot of potential for future projects. First things first, I want to reinforce the fabric where I plan to put in my zipper. And to do that, I'm going to use a medium weight fusible interfacing. To make the installation process easier, I pre-mark the size of my opening on my interfacing. This way there's no guessing at the sewing machine. When I draw these box guidelines, I want them to extend slightly beyond the ends of my zipper and be wide enough to comfortably slide my zipper pull without the fabric getting caught. My box measures 6 inches by 3/4 of an inch, and I extend my interfacing to be about 1/2 inch extra on each side. I slipped my jacket on and pinned my zippers where I wanted them. I made sure that everything was comfortable when I wanted to reach my hand into the pocket. Taking my jacket off, I am laying the fronts together and checking to make sure I have both zippers in the same place, kind of like we did on the pink jacket. Shifting the zippers, I place my pins more permanently, removing the zippers so I can mark the placement for later. I don't love using chalk or anything on the exterior of my piece as I'm not sure how well it will be removed, so I tend to opt for using pins or safety pins for this step instead. Most ready-to-wear jackets that are lined have a seam within the sleeve that was used to turn the garment right side out. You could just use this seam to make any kind of interior alterations, but because installing these pockets can be tricky, I think it will be much easier if I unstitch some of both of the side seams. This way I can get to the front of the jacket so much easier. There's no crazy stitches to unpick here, so I'm just going to use my thread snips and pull out my seams. Once I'm done installing my pockets, I can use the underarm seam again to sew up the side seams and turn everything right side out. With my side seams open, time to adhere the interfacing to the inside of my jacket. Using the pins I placed to help me, I'm going to place the interfacing matching the short ends of the box to the pins. I'm going to hop on over to the iron and press this into place and then repeat for the other side. I need to cut some of this plaid fabric to size for a pocket bag. Using my zipper as a guide, I'm going to make the bag width the same size as the total length of the zipper. I decided to make a one-piece pocket bag, which means there will be a fold at the bottom instead of a seam. This means if I want to make a 6-inch deep pocket, I need to make a piece that is 13.5 inches long. This will give me a 6-inch deep pocket bag starting from the bottom of the zipper. Then I added an inch to extend to the top of the zipper, and it also includes 1/4 inch seam allowance for both ends. I have my fabric doubled so that I can cut both bags at one time. Once I'm done drawing my pocket bag rectangle, I cut along the lines. With our fabric cut out, we are ready to hop over to the sewing machine and get started. First thing we are going to do is sew a narrow basting stitch along our pin lines around the box. Using a narrow basting stitch really helps guide us when sewing this zipper in. It gives us distinct boundaries for the pocket opening, and this type of stitching also gives the fabric some additional stability too. Once completed, we've reached the point of no return. It's time to cut the boxed area open. Starting in the center, snip cautiously into the front of the jacket, cutting along a center line until you reach a 1/2 inch before you get to either end. From there, turn and cut into each corner at about a 45-degree angle, leaving a nice triangular shape. Pick up one of the zippers and place it at the short end of the box opening along the triangle cutout, making sure your zipper is facing in the right direction. Stitch down using the existing stitch line, starting and stopping right at the stitching. Now flip it around to the other short end and attach the opposite end of the zipper. Again, remember, use the stitching as a guide and don't go beyond the existing stitching. Next, stitch down the side of the box to the side of the zipper. Again, using the existing line of stitching, start and stop your stitching at the corners. Then repeat for the second side of the zipper. Now that your zipper is officially in, give this area a good press and check out that handiwork. Next, I'll add my top stitching. Stitch around the zipper opening on the fabric at 1/8 inch. And double check to make sure you don't catch any of the lining that decided to slide under there. It's time to get the pocket bag attached. Pulling back the jacket front, exposing the slim zipper seam, line the short end of the bag to the edge of the zipper, right sides together. Stitch down the length of the zipper and the pocket bag. Flip it around, repeating the same steps, matching the opposite side of the bag to the other side of the zipper. Making sure your pocket bag is facing downward in the jacket, stitch along the sides of the pocket bag, catching the ends of the zipper. The zipper pocket is in. You can add additional seam finishes, but since this was an interior pocket, I kept it simple by using some pinking shears to help the edges from fraying with wear. We are almost there. We just need to restitch these sides and close everything up. I'm going to use the sleeve seam from earlier, pulling the side seam through the opening so that I can use my sewing machine to stitch up the side seam. Once I've sewn both my side seams up, I will close this seam the same way it was before, which was by edge stitching the seam closed. Here's the side seam all sewn up. Look, it looks completely undisturbed, and the sleeve seam is stitched up too. I really like doing seams like this in lined garments because I personally hate hand stitching, and this seam is in an area that won't be seen very much, so it's pretty hidden. So check it out, makers. This jacket has been completely elevated with this zipper and pocket, and I can't wait to wear it.